When ex-Beatle George Harrison produced a film starring newlyweds Madonna and Sean Penn, nobody expected chair-throwing tantrums, rat infestations, exploding props that nearly cost an actor his hands, and one of Hollywood's most spectacular meltdowns. From refused water stunts to contract clauses that let stars fire anyone, this production nightmare cost millions and nearly killed careers. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Shanghai Surprise. Fact 1. Tom Hanks was first choice before Sean Penn ever set foot on the Shanghai Surprise set. Producer John Cohn had a completely different actor in mind for the role of Glendon Wasey, the sleazy con man at the heart of the film. Cohn originally wanted Tom Hanks, who had just scored a major hit with the romantic comedy Splash in 1984. At the time, Hanks was still early in his film career, known primarily for comedic roles, and hadn't yet become the dramatic powerhouse he would later be recognized as. Cohn saw Hanks as the perfect fit for the charming rogue character who sells glow-in-the-dark neckties in 1930s Shanghai. However, the studio and Handmade Films had bigger ambitions. They wanted to create a blockbuster that would capture worldwide attention, and they believed that required major star power. When the opportunity arose to cast Madonna, then the biggest pop star on the planet, alongside her newly married husband Sean Penn, an acclaimed dramatic actor, the decision was made to go with what they called the Burton and Taylor of the MTV generation. Tom Hanks was swiftly rejected in favor of the celebrity couple. The studio executives thought that pairing two of the most famous people in the world would guarantee box office success, regardless of whether they were right for the roles. As it turned out, this decision would prove disastrous. Producer Cohn later admitted that Penn was too young to convincingly play the grizzled fortune hunter, and that Harrison Ford would have been a much better choice. The irony is almost painful, considering that Tom Hanks went on to become one of Hollywood's most successful and respected actors, while Shanghai Surprise became known as one of the worst films of the 1980s. Fact 2. Madonna's secret contract weapon, hidden within Madonna's contract for Shanghai Surprise, was a clause that would cause endless problems throughout the production, giving Sean Penn unprecedented power to manipulate the entire film. According to co-star Richard Griffiths, Madonna's contract specifically stated that she had casting approval of her leading man, meaning she could veto any actor chosen to play opposite her. While this might seem like a standard protection for a major star, Penn turned it into what Griffiths called his ace of trumps. Whenever conflicts arose on set, whenever Penn wanted to exert control, or whenever he simply didn't get his way, he would threaten to walk off the production entirely. The implied threat was devastatingly simple. If Penn quit, Madonna would refuse to approve any replacement actor because he was her husband, and without a leading man, the entire $17 million production would collapse. Penn reportedly used this leverage repeatedly, and everyone on set knew it. Griffiths explained that Penn would play this ace, win whatever battle he was fighting, then put it back up his sleeve and pull it out again the next time drama erupted. This created an impossible situation for director Jim Goddard and the crew, who essentially had to accommodate Penn's demands, no matter how unreasonable they became. Penn was reportedly very sensitive about the fact that Madonna had this casting approval clause, feeling it implied she was the real star of the movie when he saw himself as the lead. This resentment likely fueled much of his difficult behavior throughout filming. The clause essentially gave the couple veto power over the entire production, making it nearly impossible for anyone to push back against their increasingly problematic conduct. Fact 3. Bernard Hill got fired. Mid-production. One of the most shocking casualties of Sean Penn's temperamental behavior during Shanghai Surprise was respected British actor Bernard Hill, who would later become famous for his roles in Titanic and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Hill had been personally cast by director Jim Goddard to play the role of Walter Faraday, one of the key supporting characters in the film. Goddard and Hill had previously worked together on the acclaimed BBC production The Black Stuff, and the director trusted Hill's abilities completely. However, shortly after filming began, Hill found himself crossing swords with Sean Penn, and the results were swift and brutal. According to multiple sources, Penn simply didn't like Hill and wanted him replaced. Using the leverage provided by Madonna's contract clause, Penn got his wish. Hill was fired from the production and replaced by Paul Freeman, who had famously played the villain Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark. What made the situation even more suspicious was the speed of Freeman's arrival. Richard Griffiths, another member of the cast, noted that Freeman showed up in China the very next day after Hill's dismissal, suggesting the decision had been made at least a week earlier. The rapid replacement indicated that the producers had been planning Hill's removal well in advance, likely anticipating or preparing for Penn's demands. For Hill, being sacked from Shanghai Surprise became an unfortunate footnote in his otherwise distinguished career. Years later, after Hill had achieved international fame for playing Captain Smith in Titanic and King Theoden in the Lord of the Rings films, the incident was mentioned in his obituaries as an example of the challenges working actors face, even talented ones, when they encounter difficult stars with contractual power. Fact 4. Sean Penn demanded makeup. First daily, among the many petty power plays that Sean Penn inflicted on the Shanghai Surprise production, one of the most bizarre was his daily insistence on being in the makeup chair before Madonna, regardless of the filming schedule or practical considerations. This wasn't about efficiency or about who needed to be camera-ready first. Penn demanded that he be in makeup every single morning before his wife, even on days when Madonna was scheduled to film first, and Penn wasn't needed on set until hours later. The rule was absolute and non-negotiable, creating constant logistical headaches for the crew and makeup department. According to accounts from the production, this demand stemmed from Penn's deep resentment about Madonna's contract clause giving her casting approval, which he interpreted as the studio treating her as the real star of the film. Penn saw himself as the lead actor, the serious, dramatic talent who should be given top billing and priority treatment. By forcing the production to put him in makeup first every day, he was asserting his dominance and importance, even if it meant wasting time and resources. The makeup crew had no choice but to comply, as crossing Penn could result in him walking off the set or creating another crisis. This meant that on days when Madonna needed to be ready earlier for her scenes, she would have to wait in her trailer while Penn went through his makeup routine first. Then she would finally get her turn. The delays this caused rippled through the entire shooting schedule, contributing to the production falling behind and going over budget. It was yet another example of how Penn's ego and need for control created an atmosphere of dysfunction and inefficiency that plagued Shanghai Surprise from beginning to end, turning what should have been a straightforward adventure film into a nightmarish production. Fact 5. Explosion nearly destroyed. Actors' hands. One of the most dangerous moments during the Shanghai Surprise production came during a night scene that required an explosive prop, and it resulted from Sean Penn's reckless perfectionism. Actor K. Tong Lim, who played the villain Mei Gun, was filming a scene where his character receives a box containing precious cargo from Penn's character, Glendon Wasey. The box was rigged to explode in Lim's hands as part of the scene. The special effects crew set up the explosion with a carefully calculated charge designed to be dramatic but safe for the actor holding it. They filmed the take, and it went off exactly as planned. However, Penn wasn't satisfied with the result. Without informing Lim or the director, Penn went directly to the explosives crew and asked them to put a much larger charge in the box for the next take. The crew complied with the star's request, and when they filmed the scene again, the explosion was significantly more powerful than anyone expected except Penn and the effects team who knew about the change. The blast nearly took off both of K. Tong Lim's hands. Lim later recalled that he spent the rest of that night between takes dipping his hands in buckets of ice to deal with the pain and try to reduce any damage from the burns and impact. Remarkably, Lim didn't suffer permanent injury, but the incident demonstrated just how dangerous Penn's behavior had become. By going around the director and safety protocols to secretly increase the explosive charge without the actor's knowledge or consent, Penn put Lim's physical safety at serious risk. It's the kind of reckless decision that could have ended someone's career or caused life-altering injuries, all because Penn wanted a more dramatic visual effect for his scene. Fact 6. Madonna refused to get wet. Despite being one of the biggest stars in the world and playing a supposedly adventurous missionary nurse, Madonna drew a hard line when it came to certain physical requirements of the role, particularly anything involving water. During filming in Hong Kong, there was a scene set on a pier where both Penn and Madonna's characters were supposed to jump into the ocean as part of the action sequence. Sean Penn was perfectly willing to do the stunt and get into the water as scripted. However, Madonna flatly refused to get wet for the scene. No amount of persuasion from the director or crew could change her mind. This created an immediate problem as the scene required her character to emerge from the water dripping wet. The solution the crew devised was both expensive and absurd. Actor Clyde Kusatsu, who played Joe Go in the film, later recounted watching as a crew member arrived on set with an entire trolley loaded with bottles of Evian water. Rather than jumping into the Hong Kong harbor like her co-star, Madonna stood on the pier while crew members sprayed her down with the expensive bottled water to simulate the look of someone who had just emerged from the ocean. The visual result was presumably acceptable on camera, but the behind-the-scenes reality highlighted the increasingly difficult working conditions and the stars' refusal to fully commit to their roles. For a production already hemorrhaging money and plagued with problems, having to purchase and use cases of Evian to fake a simple water scene was just another example of how the stars' demands and unwillingness to cooperate made even basic filmmaking tasks complicated and costly. It also stood in stark contrast to Penn's willingness to do the stunt, adding to the tensions between the couple and the growing sense that Madonna wasn't fully invested in the film. Fact 7. George Harrison claimed stress restarted his smoking. For former Beatle George Harrison, producing Shanghai Surprise turned out to be far more than just a financial disaster. He believed it may have contributed to his eventual death. Harrison had founded Handmade Films with the intention of producing quality British cinema, and the company had enjoyed several successes before taking on this ambitious Hollywood-style production. However, the nightmare of dealing with Madonna and Sean Penn's behavior, the constant media circus, the crew conflicts, and the production chaos took a severe toll on Harrison's health and well-being. After the film wrapped, Harrison allegedly told people that the experience had been so incredibly stressful that he had started smoking cigarettes again, a habit he had previously quit. In interviews, Harrison was remarkably candid about how painful the production had been, calling Penn a pain in the arse, and saying that Madonna needed to realize you can be a fabulous person and be humble as well. He also referenced the film The Producers, joking that Shanghai Surprise had the wrong cast, the wrong actors, and the wrong director, asking, "Where did I go right?" Harrison's renewed smoking habit is particularly tragic in hindsight. He died in 2001 at the age of 58 from lung cancer. While it's impossible to definitively link his death to any single cause, Harrison himself apparently believed that the stress of Shanghai Surprise played a role in restarting a dangerous habit that may have contributed to his cancer years later. It's a sobering reminder that the consequences of difficult film productions can extend far beyond box office numbers and critical reviews, potentially affecting the long-term health and lives of everyone involved in ways that aren't immediately visible. Fact 8. Rats infested the actor trailers. The difficult working conditions on Shanghai Surprise extended beyond interpersonal drama to include genuinely unpleasant and unsanitary physical conditions during the location shoots in Asia. Throughout the production, which filmed in Hong Kong, Macau, and surrounding areas, the cast and crew faced numerous environmental challenges that made an already troubled production even more miserable. One of the most disturbing problems was the infestation of rats living underneath the actors' trailers. These weren't just occasional rodent sightings. There were actual rat colonies nesting beneath the mobile trailers where the stars and supporting cast were supposed to relax between takes and prepare for their scenes. The rats remained a persistent problem throughout the Asian portion of the shoot, as the production didn't have the resources or ability to properly address the infestation. Cast members would enter their trailers knowing that rats were scurrying around in the crawl spaces just beneath their feet. Combined with the freezing cold temperatures that Harrison later mentioned, with crew members trying to warm themselves with cups of tea while Madonna stayed in her heated trailer, the rat infestation contributed to an overall atmosphere of discomfort and dysfunction. For actors accustomed to professional Hollywood productions with proper facilities and pest control, discovering that their trailers were built over rat nests must have been deeply unpleasant. It also highlighted the production's poor planning and the challenging logistics of filming in locations that weren't equipped to handle a major international film production. The rats were just one more indignity in a long list of problems that plagued Shanghai Surprise, creating miserable working conditions that certainly didn't help improve anyone's mood or performance during an already tense and conflict-ridden shoot. Fact 9. Mass crew food poisoning. Adding to the catalog of disasters that befell the Shanghai Surprise production, a significant number of crew members suffered from food poisoning while shooting on location in Asia. This wasn't just one or two people getting mildly sick. It was a widespread health crisis that affected multiple crew members and disrupted filming schedules. The exact source of the contamination was never definitively identified, but the mass illness outbreak forced the production to halt work while affected crew members recovered. When you're filming in foreign locations with different food safety standards and unfamiliar cuisines, food poisoning is always a risk for international productions. However, the scale of the outbreak on Shanghai Surprise suggested either particularly bad luck or inadequate provisions for the crew's food safety. Having numerous technicians, camera operators, lighting specialists, and other essential crew members laid up with stomach illness simultaneously created major logistical problems for the production, which was already behind schedule and over budget. The food poisoning incident also contributed to the overall sense of misery and dysfunction that characterized the entire shoot. Crew members who were already dealing with freezing cold weather, rat-infested trailers, difficult stars, and constant paparazzi invasions now also had to worry about whether their next meal would make them violently ill. This kind of basic failure to provide safe working conditions for the crew undoubtedly contributed to the low morale that plagued the production. When combined with all the other problems, from Sean Penn's violent outbursts to Madonna and Penn's isolation from the crew, the food poisoning outbreak became yet another reason for crew members to leak negative stories to the tabloid reporters who were constantly hovering around the set looking for scandal. Fact 10. The publicist got fired. On day 2, the media frenzy surrounding Shanghai Surprise began almost immediately, and by the second day of filming, the situation had already spiraled so completely out of control that it resulted in the first of many firings. Madonna and Sean Penn were newly married, both at the absolute peak of their fame, and they represented exactly the kind of celebrity power couple that tabloids and entertainment media desperately wanted to cover. From the moment the production set up in Macau and Hong Kong, photographers and reporters swarmed the set, trying to get exclusive shots and stories about the famous couple. The invasion was relentless and overwhelming. Sean Penn, who had always had a notoriously hostile relationship with the press and paparazzi, was furious about the constant intrusions. He blamed the film's publicist, Chris Nixon, for the media chaos, even though Nixon was simply trying to do his job of generating publicity for the film. Penn demanded that Nixon be fired and replaced, claiming that the publicist's efforts were attracting too much unwanted attention. The producers, already terrified of Penn walking off the production, complied immediately. Chris Nixon was terminated on the second day of filming and replaced with someone Penn found more acceptable. The irony of Penn's demand was thick. Nixon later pointed out that Penn had arrogantly told him that the film didn't need any publicity because people would go see it simply because he and Madonna were in it. This dismissive attitude toward the publicist's work, combined with Penn's expectation that somehow the media could be kept away from the biggest celebrity couple in the world, showed a fundamental disconnect from reality. Firing the publicist on day 2 set a dangerous precedent that Penn could get anyone removed from the production whenever he wanted, emboldening his increasingly erratic behavior throughout the rest of the shoot. Fact 11. Never released official soundtrack. Despite the fact that former Beatle George Harrison wrote and recorded 5 original songs specifically for Shanghai Surprise, the official soundtrack album was never commercially released, becoming a lost piece of Harrison's musical catalog. Harrison composed Shanghai Surprise as a duet with singer Vicki Brown, along with 4 other complete songs: Someplace Else, Breath Away from Heaven, Zigzag, and Hottest Gong in Town. These weren't just throwaway compositions. Harrison put genuine effort into creating music that would enhance the film's 1930s Shanghai atmosphere and give it a unique sonic identity. The title track, Shanghai Surprise, was issued as a promotional single in 1986, but the full soundtrack album was canceled when it became clear the film was going to be a catastrophic failure. MGM and Handmade Films apparently decided there was no commercial value in releasing a soundtrack for a movie that audiences actively despised and avoided. However, Harrison didn't let all the music disappear entirely. He re-recorded new versions of Breath Away from Heaven and Someplace Else for his 1987 album Cloud 9, which marked a successful comeback in his solo career. An alternate mix of Zigzag with added backing vocals was released as the B-side of Harrison's When We Was Fab single in early 1988. The song Hottest Gong in Town eventually appeared on an EP that came with the 1992 book Songs by George Harrison II. Finally, in 2004, when Cloud 9 was remastered and reissued, the original title song and the single mix of Zigzag were added as bonus tracks. So, while the Shanghai Surprise soundtrack was never officially released as planned, Harrison's songs did eventually find their way to audiences through various other releases, salvaging at least some artistic value from the production disaster. Fact 12. Stars tried to remove themselves from tie-in novel. As Shanghai Surprise approached its release date, Madonna and Sean Penn were so desperate to distance themselves from the film that they attempted to literally erase themselves from the movie's tie-in novel, even though it was already at the printer. Viking Press had commissioned a novelization of the screenplay, a common practice for major films in the 1980s, which would adapt the movie's story into book form and feature the stars' images on the cover. These tie-in novels were typically rushed to market to capitalize on the film's publicity and provide additional merchandising revenue. However, just days before the Shanghai Surprise novel was scheduled to go to the printers, Madonna and Penn made an extraordinary demand. They insisted that their likenesses be completely removed from the book. This wasn't a request for minor changes or different photographs. They wanted Viking Press to redesign the cover and potentially revise the content to eliminate any association between them and the project. The stars' panic about being connected to Shanghai Surprise was understandable given how disastrously the production had gone and the terrible buzz the film was already receiving in Hollywood circles. They could see the disaster coming and wanted to protect their reputations as much as possible. Viking Press had to scramble to accommodate this last-minute demand from 2 of the most powerful celebrities in the world. The incident perfectly captured how thoroughly Madonna and Penn had turned against the film they had once been excited to make together. It also demonstrated their awareness that Shanghai Surprise was going to seriously damage their careers, and their desperate attempt to minimize that damage by erasing their involvement wherever possible, even in ancillary products like novelizations that most people would never read. Fact 13. Opened in only 400 theaters. MGM's distribution strategy for Shanghai Surprise revealed exactly how little confidence the studio had in the film, even before critics and audiences could weigh in on its quality. Rather than giving it a wide release across the country, MGM opened Shanghai Surprise on August 29, 1986, Labor Day weekend, in just 400 theaters and only in the Midwest and Northeast regions. The major film markets of Los Angeles and New York City had to wait 3 additional weeks before the movie arrived in their theaters. This staggered, limited release strategy was highly unusual for a film starring two of the biggest celebrities in the world and backed by a $17 million budget. The reason was transparent. MGM was trying to delay the inevitable critical doubts. Massacre. By keeping the film away from Los Angeles and New York, where the most influential film critics worked for publications like the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Variety, and The Hollywood Reporter, the studio hoped to buy time and prevent devastating reviews from killing the film's box office chances in its opening weekend. The strategy was based on the assumption that without major critics reviewing it immediately, casual moviegoers might show up out of curiosity about Madonna and Penn. However, the plan backfired spectacularly. Even before the major critics got to see it, word of mouth was so toxic and the film performed so poorly in its limited Midwest and Northeast release that MGM had to make severe cuts to its marketing budget. An MGM executive was quoted in trade publications saying this was necessary because the interest in the film has been non-existent. By the time Shanghai Surprise finally limped into Los Angeles and New York, 3 weeks later, everyone already knew it was a disaster, and the critical reviews only confirmed what audiences had already decided. Fact 14. Lost over $14 million. Shanghai Surprise stands as one of the most catastrophic box office failures of the 1980s, losing the vast majority of its production budget and becoming a cautionary tale about star-driven vanity projects. The film had a production budget of $17 million, which was substantial for 1986, especially for what was essentially a period adventure comedy. Handmade Films and MGM invested heavily in the project, banking on the star power of Madonna and Sean Penn to guarantee a profitable return. Instead, the film grossed only $2,315,683 during its entire theatrical run. To put that in perspective, the movie recovered less than 14% of its production budget from ticket sales. This figure only accounts for box office revenue, not the additional millions spent on marketing, distribution, prints, and advertising costs, which typically equal or exceed the production budget for major releases. When you factor in those additional expenses, Shanghai Surprise likely needed to gross at least $40 to $50 million just to break even. Falling short by such a massive margin meant that virtually everyone involved in financing the film lost money. For George Harrison's Handmade Films, this was the company's first major bust after a string of successful or at least profitable British productions. The financial disaster contributed to Handmade's eventual decline and struggles in subsequent years. For MGM, it was an embarrassing failure that damaged relationships and made studios more cautious about greenlighting films based solely on star power, without considering whether those stars were appropriate for the roles. The film also essentially killed any momentum Madonna had built from her previous film, Desperately Seeking Susan, and it would take Sean Penn several years to fully recover his reputation after this spectacular failure. Fact 15. Director didn't make another film for 11 years. The trauma of directing Shanghai Surprise effectively ended Jim Goddard's film career for over a decade and permanently altered his professional trajectory. Before Shanghai Surprise, Goddard had built a respectable reputation in British television, including winning a BAFTA award in 1983 for his television work. He was known as a competent professional director who worked well with actors and delivered quality results on time and on budget. When producer John Cohn approached him to direct Shanghai Surprise based on his excellent work on the miniseries Riley, Ace of Spies, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for Goddard to transition from television to major motion pictures. Instead, the production became a nightmare that destroyed his confidence and reputation. Goddard found himself completely overwhelmed by the personalities he had to manage, the media circus, the production chaos, and the interference from the stars. The mild-mannered British director was simply not equipped to handle Sean Penn's violent outbursts, Madonna's demands, the paparazzi invasions, or George Harrison having to fly in as an emergency mediator. After MGM rejected his initial cut of the film and Goddard tried unsuccessfully to find alternative distribution, he was forced to return to MGM and accept their editorial control. The experience was so devastating that Goddard didn't direct another feature film until 1997, 11 years later. He essentially retreated back to British television, where he could work in a more controlled environment without volatile Hollywood stars. By the time he finally returned to feature filmmaking over a decade later, the industry had moved on, and he never regained the momentum or opportunities that Shanghai Surprise had destroyed. His career became a cautionary tale about how a single disastrous production can derail even a talented director's trajectory, especially when that director is caught between unreasonable stars, demanding studios, and impossible circumstances beyond their control.